Actually, yes, please do, because Jode's just said that.
So yeah, let's record it.
Because I'll chuck it on the website for people who can't make it, because we know everybody's got a lot of stuff on tonight anyway.
Okay. Now whoever's getting heaps of messages, you just got to mute yourself.
What?
Oh. Phone off.
Sorry.
All right. Well, yes, I mean, Sammy and Beck, you guys both know Josh, obviously. Charlotte, you wouldn't know Josh, or me. Me and Josh work together. So we're all from Community Church Hornsby, except for Beck, who's in Cronulla. And yeah, we're part of CRC, obviously. So we're up in Hornsby in Sydney. Nice and locked down at the moment. And basically, Josh, maybe I guess as you share, we're sharing to people who are going to be listening in later as well. But
cool.
Yeah, we're just going to unpack some stuff around like discipleship and I guess building relationships. I don't think we had an official topic or title, but we're just basically unpack just a bit around discipleship relationship specific to young people. And obviously, if you're watching this, encouraging is to probably go like maybe sit down and watch it with your team as well. And yeah, make the most of that because it'll be good. You can stop, you can pause, you can discuss, and we'll just kind of see where it leads. And yeah, we'll just have fun with it. So I mean, that's kind of the overview. Josh, do you want to just maybe give people like a two minute rundown of like who you are, and maybe just like a little bit about your journey, like leading young people, just to give you a bit of context and background?
Cool, sure. I was like being super entertained by listening to Luca in the background. But
yeah, so I'll mute myself from now on.
Yeah, nice. Hey, Timothy, good to have you joining us. Yeah, so I'm Josh. I pastor at Community Church Hornsby. I've grown up in and around this church my whole life, pretty much since I was probably 14 years old. I met my wife there. And for a number of years, we were the youth pastors there. And so although I'm not currently doing youth work or anything like that, I have had a fair bit of time in that youth space, and I love it. I love young people. Young people are so awesome. They're so raw. They're so real. So for me, like, I actually can't believe I finished working in youth ministry. It went like the click of the finger for me. Like, it went past so fast. And sometimes I'm like, how did that even happen? I almost wish it didn't. Like, I wish I could have just stayed in that space for longer, because it's such a massive opportunity. You know, people who are in their teens are incredibly impressionable at such an important time of life, and it can really set people up for success. So I love youth ministry. Massive blessing to get to come and share with you guys. One of the things I might do tonight, if we're going to have a discussion around discipleship as well, first thing I would say is, like, I am definitely not the guru. So I'm not the one with all the answers, but maybe we can even just foster a bit of discussion around the topic, share some of our experiences as well. So, yeah. Samuel, you're on mute.
What an absolute rookie MC I am on the Zoom. What's up, Gloria? Welcome. Yeah, cool. No, I think that's good. Like, and on that as well, if anyone has any questions, like, we'll really just like, we'll keep things simple. I think simple's good. And like I said, just have a discussion. And if anyone wants to just jump in with a question, either just unmute yourself and jump in, or there's like a little raise hand button, I think, in Zoom as well. So you can just pop that little hand up. But I guess off the bat, Josh, like just to get a bit of context, like, I know a lot about your journey with discipleship and kind of figuring that out. So in this day and age, like, what do you think discipleship is? Because there's a lot of different interpretations, there's a lot of different descriptions, and I think it can be a really, I guess, like, airy-fairy topic in a lot of ways, or a lot of different ideas surrounding it. So I don't know, just maybe break it down like in simple ways of like what you understand discipleship to be in this day and age, and kind of how you go about that.
Awesome. Yeah, I think that's a really good question. Discipleship just basically means to follow. So to follow Jesus. It's one of those things I think we know it's super important. Like, we talk about discipleship and immediately our minds probably go to something like Matthew 28, the Great Commission. We know if Jesus says it, that it's important. And he says, go and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit. And we understand that it's important, but what actually does discipleship mean? And I actually had a thought. So I've got a bunch of like little scriptures in front of me that I thought, you don't want my opinion. I think it's better that we get like scripture and we understand what it truly is. So this is where my mind went immediately, because it's incredibly practical. And it's at the beginning of Jesus's ministry, and he sees these two brothers, and it just says Simon called Peter and his brother Andrew, and they were out fishing. So they're just out casting their nets into the lake. And Jesus walks up to them, and this is as simple, I think, as we can put it. He just says, follow me. And that's really what discipleship is. Follow me. And he says, I'm going to make you fishers of men. And I think what's really telling is what they do. It says that once they dropped their nets. So that was their livelihood. That was their income. That was everything that they did. It wasn't that was unimportant. In fact, Jesus would use their skills in other ways. And he just goes, you know what? Like they just drop everything that they have and they follow him. So the first thing I'd say about discipleship is like, it's super practical. I think one of the mistakes sometimes that is made in church culture is that discipleship is about what you know. So we immediately go to like teaching people stuff. Has anybody else ever had that kind of interpretation? You think like discipleship is I got to teach people stuff, which is part of it. It's really good to be able to like encourage people in sound teaching. But when I look at stories like this, these guys are out in the middle of a lake or on the shores preparing their nets or whatever. And this man named Jesus comes up to them and says, follow me. And these first disciples literally followed him. So like they do drop their nets and they actually then start walking around with this guy. So that was what it was like to follow a rabbi. You literally followed them. And I think that's hugely encouraging. Like the physical Jesus is we're not following him in that sense, but he still has the same words to each and every single one of us, which is follow me. And that's what it means to be a disciple. And so I think like one of the coolest things we can do in youth ministry is move it just from teaching people about beliefs, which is really important, and actually living in such a way that people get to follow, to give them something to tangibly follow and do, because discipleship looks like something. So when I think about it, one of the cool, like I think the best ways that I've thought about it is I've learned to substitute a word, discipleship, for apprenticeship. I don't know, has anyone here actually done an apprenticeship? Any sort? Maybe not, I'm not sure. But yeah, Beck, yeah, with graphic design and that kind of thing. One of the cool things about doing like an apprenticeship, so imagine being a mechanic. If you're doing an apprenticeship, it means 4 days on the tools and 1 day at TAFE. So it's like a really good picture. Like it's actually super practical. Like 4 days working on the car. Hey, Jody. 4 days working on the cars, tools in hand, down in the grease and dirt, learning from someone beside you. And then you duck out of that space once a week and you go into a class and you make sense of your experience. I reckon often in youth ministry and church, we're big on the preaching and the teaching and the Bible studies, which is really important, but we almost flip it around and we go 4 days of teaching and then we never get the experience or get to live it out. So like for me, I think like one of the things I love about Jesus is when you follow his ministry in the Gospels, is that his discipleship program was like super practical. So when they followed him, where did they go? They had casual chats with him as they walked along the road. They had meals with him. They went out and they, saw people healed with him. He ends up going, you know what, you guys go out. You guys go do some healing and praying. He sends them out on mission. They pray together. They go on boat trips together, right? Like Jesus would teach a whole crowd, and then afterwards he'd go away and give a special like little insight to the disciples. And so there was this intimacy, and it involved every bit of life. Like when Jesus is at a party with the sinners and tax collectors, so are his disciples. And so the discipleship program, if you want to put it that way, is about life and sharing life and learning to walk a new way, not just change our thinking. Thinking is super important, but it's actually about what we do. So like, just to sum up that thought, really like something that stuck with me in recent time, I'll read it to you, is Matthew chapter 7. Jesus has just given this amazing teaching, but then he summarizes it by saying this: everyone who hears these words of mine and puts them into practice is like a wise man who built his house on a rock. And so like, Jesus has great teaching, there's no doubt about that, but his intention is that our lives are like, houses built on rocks. And so discipleship is always practical. It's always related to life. And at the end of the day, for our kids and our young people, what we want to give them is so much more than information. We want to actually create a space for them to experience life alongside us, because the only thing that's going to be like a house built on a rock is a life where you've put these things into practice. So if it helps you, I always imagine discipleship as apprenticeship, because it's super practical and it's about being on the tools and not just knowing the stuff. So yeah, what do you guys think about that? Anyone want to share? I'll open it up.
Just jump in if you want to add anything. If you have any other experiences, I reckon. Sick. Well, anytime you can take it away if anyone has any questions. Yeah, I think that's sick. 100% I'm with you on that. Excuse my son in the background. He's super loud. I hope it's not.
He's the best. I love it.
We love him.
I'll try and speak up. So I guess bringing that back then, that idea of apprenticeship and following, I think obviously, I think the key there is that it has to be done in proximity. Can't be done from a distance. You've got to be close to people in terms of your physical distance, but also just your relationship level with them. So when it comes to leading young people, and maybe, not even just youth, because I know that there'll be young adult leaders who listen in on that, on this call as well. And I think it's all discipleship at the end of the day. Is that a question, Beck, or? Oh yeah, cool. Will you jump in if you want to, Beck, and we'll go from there.
Finish what you're saying though. I just put my hand up while I had my thought.
Okay, well, remember your thought. Maybe you can pop it in the chat, and then we can take it from there. So on that, what would you say is like some of the essentials, or I guess the basis of leading young people or young adults? Like, what are because there's a million things, like, we've both led in youth, and everyone who's watching this has led or is leading youth or young adults. And there's a million things we can do, and there's a million good ideas, but what are the things that should form our basis for actually leading that generation? Yeah.
So forgive me if this is super basic, guys, but I'm a pretty basic dude. Honestly, I think one of and I say the same kind of thing whenever I talk to youth leaders. We all want to have the best, youth ministry, and I think that's a really good thing. That's a really good drive to have. But if you're anything like me, and your experience is like some of my experience in youth ministry is, I want to I would always go to what are we doing, and I'd always go to the kind of events that we could do and the kind of people that we could draw. But as I've gone on and learned, I'm a disciple, so I'm always learning. It's an ongoing life process of learning. I reckon in recent years, I have more and more become, it's less about what we're doing and more about who we're becoming. And we actually begin to share with people in proximity, close relationship with them. We begin to share parts of who we are. So I think the basis for discipleship, before we lead, every single one of us need to be led. And so Paul puts it this way, and I think, Beck, you and I chatted about this the other day. He actually says, follow my example as I follow the example of Christ. So let's all imagine that for a moment. Imagine that someone follows you 24/7, 24 hours a day for the next 7 days. Are they helped or are they hindered? Are they going to be frothing on what you show them and your life with Christ, or is it going to kind of hurt them. I know it's a really intense thought, but like before we lead others and think about strategies to get our kids doing well, the first thing is we've got to ask, where are we leading them? And so I think the basis for discipleship is first being a disciple ourselves. And so like deep love for Jesus, deep obedience to Jesus, growing in prayer, growing in our love for the scripture. Jesus has this intense encounter with the religious leaders. You can read about it in Matthew chapter 23. But one of the things that he says to them, and like, I got to be honest, like I have the privilege of leading a church, but I hear these kinds of words and I'm like, okay, I got to hold on to this, and I got to take it seriously in one sense. And he calls the spiritual leaders of his day, he calls them blind guides. And so like, just think about that for a second. Imagine trying to lead a bunch of people and you can't see. That's super difficult. And so like, I think the basis for any kind of like healthy discipleship, loving our young people, leading our young people, has to do with first and foremost being led ourselves. So keeping that open connection and love relationship with Jesus authentic. That's the other thing about young people. They know when it's not real. Like they know when and that's not to say we can't be real, because there's going to be times we struggle. Maybe like being an apprentice means at times you share your struggles with others. You actually let them in on where you're finding life difficult. So authenticity is a big part of that. But one of my, like, I don't know if you call it a life verse, but one of the things I want to be, so in my life, I want to be this, is Acts chapter 4. I think it's Peter and John. They give a big spiel in front of a whole bunch of religious leaders. And it's because a whole bunch of people have kicked up a stink. They're like, oh my gosh, they healed this person on the Sabbath. And they're all like, oh my goodness, how could you do that? Da, 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 da. But they basically just share with them something. And then all the people who heard what they had to say something. And this is the kind of person I want to be. It's in chapter 4, verse 13, it says, it became clear, like these were just common people, but it became clear that these men had been with Jesus. And, you know, like when it comes to discipleship, what more can we give our young people than we're the kind of people that have been with Jesus? Because you're going to come across really difficult, curly, hard situations as youth leaders, and you're not going to know all the answers, and that's totally okay. The best thing you can offer is like, man, this guy, this girl has been with Jesus, like, and there's no question about it. So I guess like for me, the basis of all good discipleship is first being, you know, disciples ourselves and committing to being lifelong learners. And as we learn, we just pass on what we've received. After all, you know, you're all shepherds in one sense, like you're all shepherds, you're leading young people, but we all follow the great shepherd. Jesus is the leader. And so as we follow him, we can actually say with confidence, like Paul did, hey, follow me. So it's crazy. Like it's a pretty humbling process to be a part of. So yeah, be a good follower before a good leader. I think that's like the key to discipleship.
Mad. You kind of
yes, how good are Jodie's notes? I'm just like looking at her notes popping up on the screen. So good.
Yeah, no.
It's good. I love it. I love that verse. It's really good.
You kind of answered the third question I had down, which was how can we teach young people to disciple others? I think you kind of touched on it there, and just being by being a follower first is kind of what you want to pass on. I don't know if you want to add anything to that, like
good, thank you.
Making disciples that make disciples, I think is the key there. I don't know if you want to add anything to that. If not, there's some questions there in the chat we can jump to.
Yeah, I mean, I think give people space to lead wherever they're at. I think sometimes, like, you know what I love about youth ministry? I love that it's messy. Like, one of my favorite things is that it doesn't all make sense. Heaps of people make mistakes. I remember leading in youth ministry, and I had this team, and like they're all beautiful and awesome people, but it just got so messy at times because they were young adults themselves, and their own lives, we had struggles and real stuff was happening, and it wasn't always good, but there is grace. And I just think that God is so gracious to us that if you want to create disciples, give them a chance to teach others what they're learning themselves. Every time, like, create a culture where they can pass on what they've already received. Here's like a really interesting thought. I always ponder on this. When did the disciples become like Christians? I actually believe Jesus was into like pre-conversion discipleship, which meant that he created space for people wherever they were in their journey. And there's no way when the disciples signed up to following Jesus, they knew what it meant. There's not a chance. They're figuring that out as they go along. And then even just a short way into their journey, he's like, all right, guys, you've seen what I've been doing. I'm going to send you out, like Matthew chapter 10. I want you guys to go out in pairs and do what I've been teaching you to do. They're not ready for that. Like another year later, and Peter still doesn't understand that Jesus is going to die on a cross. So he doesn't get it all. But they had been given chances and spaces to lead. So it's not about being naive, but I reckon if we want to make disciples that make disciples that make disciples, we've got to be prepared. It will be a bit messy. People are going to make mistakes, but the graciousness of God covers all our mistakes. And if we're open and honest and humble with each other, we can give young people a chance to lead. And I would give all the people that typically don't get a chance to lead or get overlooked or get forgotten in other places, give them a chance, give them a shot. Whatever it is, let them do what you're doing and see what happens. Like, God loves to use the foolish things of this world to shame the wise. This isn't about having it all together or knowing all the answers, but like a core conviction to follow the ways of Jesus. That's a lifelong thing. I'm not there. I'm learning to follow every day like everybody else. So just create space for people. That would be what I would say.
Yeah, it's mad. Yeah, so I'll jump to Beck's question if that's cool in the chat. And guys, if anyone else is like, oh, I'd love to pick up on a thought or something that Josh has said, you can pop your hand up or just type something into the chat. That's fine. So Beck says, Jesus had his 12 that he did life closely with. What is your advice and experience with how many people you can disciple? And how do you not take on too many people so that you spread too thin or they spread too thin? Yeah, we've talked about this. So yeah, I don't know. Yeah.
Well, what do we think? How many people can you do, like, meaningfully do life with? How many people do you guys reckon like you can really?
I feel like as many as you can count on your hand. I don't think you can do any more than what you can count on your hands, because like you don't want to spread yourself too thin, but also like you don't want to just stick with that like one person, which is fine if it's just like that one person, but like, yeah, I think more than 10 might be a bit too much for yourself.
Do you think it also like varies depending on the sphere of your world that they're in and what they're navigating? Like, obviously you do life with people that are more like peers, but in the space of like discipling people in ministry or something, like you could have 5 young people that, maybe just need encouragement to get into their word. But other than that, you walk pretty closely together and there's not heaps that you have to pour out that gives more than you normally would. And then you could have 6 people that are wrestling depression, anxiety, fear, like identity, and they require something like every day they're asking for you to pour into them and really get in the trenches with them. Like, how do you navigate that and know that you're not like pouring out too much? I don't know.
Like, I would say, like, and I don't navigate it perfectly, but they're really good questions. Like, so we can take like lessons from Jesus, I think, because Jesus had a few that were really close to him, Peter, James, and John. So he has like these 3 guys that are super close. They're the kinds of guys that when he's sweating blood and having an anxiety attack in the Garden of Gethsemane and praying, they're the 3 that he calls a little closer. Like, guys, could you just stay awake with me? Could you just be present? And he's teaching them even in that. And so I think there's 3 that he like confides in and is super close with. And then he has 12 that he opens up a space for. And I think that's a really important thing, because even like you said, Sammy, like if our interpretation of like discipleship is one-on-one, I'm not getting anywhere near 10 people. I can tell you right now, I can't handle 10 people, not even close. So I think what we're, as leaders and as people in youth ministry, we want to create a discipling culture. So when we learn about Jesus, how did he disciple? Honestly, rarely do I see, like off the top of my head, I can't think about too many times when it's Jesus one-on-one with a disciple. So typically what he's created is a context for conversation, like we're doing right now. This is why I believe in, like at our church, we call them communities. You might have your small groups or your connect groups in your youth ministry or whatever. That is a great space for discipleship, because so I'll give props to Sam. Sam and I do like a fair bit of life together. I have a friend who I do life with. He's not yet a believer, but I would consider our relationship with him one of discipleship, because we're sharing all of our life. I've got to walk with him through really difficult times. But here's the thing, that's just one person, and he has a little boy. And there's been times when I'm like, I don't have it in me right now. Like, I'm exhausted. I love this guy. And one of the learnings along the way is I'm not made to disciple on my own. And so I think one of the things when Jesus even sends people out into mission is he does it in pairs. And so one of the best things that I've learned over the years is if you're looking to disciple someone, bring them into a group context. And now your time together, your conversations together, your praying together, that becomes discipleship. They get to see. And the other thing is, like, when Sam came along, you know, and he met my friend, spent more time with him, and my friend now belongs to we walk on Saturdays. It's a really simple thing. We walk as a bunch of guys, but I see it as symbolic of what we want to do with these men as well. But all of a sudden, you know what I noticed? It brought me great joy that when, you know, my mate had something going on in his life or a new job or whatever, that he called Sam and not me. I was like, oh, sick. I'm like, that's so good, because I'm like, now it's not just me. There's a community and a family around this guy. So I reckon that's the way that Jesus disciples. And then you got to remember, discipleship, there are crowds involved too. So Jesus sent out 72 disciples at one stage, or the 70. Like, what's that about? So there are definitely cascading effects, I think. So, but be reasonable. Like, how many people can I meaningfully? I reckon 3 at a time. I reckon I can share life like pretty deep, like in the same way Jesus was, maybe with like 3 people at a time. So my hope is that they're going to do it too with another 3 people. There will be the other context for 10 and 12 and, you know, 20 people, but like life on life, just a few. Maybe you guys might be able to do more, and that's perfectly fine, or less. That's fine too. Just being realistic with that, I think, does that answer the question? That kind of like, yeah.
I think as well, you have to think about what season you're in. Like, if you're, you know, got 5 kids, probably your capacity is a bit limited, and you got to do home life well to do discipleship well. So I think you have to, at one season, you may have been able to have capacity for more people and contribute effectively to a lot more people than you can when, you know, you're in a relationship, or you've got a young family, or you're working full time, or whatever your context comes into as well, how effectively you can disciple and what your capacity is.
Yeah, for sure. Does anyone else have any questions? Feel free to jump in or post it in the chat. We kind of got through all of our planned stuff. Josh smashed it out of the park, so we can just go free from here.
I have a question. Say, when you're talking about discipleship, like, a lot of people, particularly in a Christian context, can find it hard to have boundaries. Like, have you already covered that? I was a bit late to the party, but just like, as in, do you have some advice for boundaries around people becoming dependent on you as opposed to being dependent on Christ, and overextending yourself, you know, with people who have genuine strong needs that you aren't actually equipped to maybe help them with? Yeah,
I think that's a really good question. I think I think it's actually even more important for like youth, because I remember that getting like messages at all hours of the night from all different kind of people. And I think also you picked up on a really important dynamic is at the end of the day, we're not creating followers of us, we're creating followers of Jesus, which means we don't actually want to step in between a follower and Jesus. Like we don't want to become, you know, like of course God is at work in our ministry and he's at work in us. And so sometimes we are the shoulder to cry on, and that's an effective and good, you know, demonstration of Christ. But ultimately we want people to be dependent on him. So all good discipleship is like pointing people to Jesus. But I think what are you comfortable with and what can you handle? What is appropriate for you to handle, and what should you actually like talk to another leader about? I think having seeing discipleship less about one-on-one and more about community culture and groups is a really good way to keep boundaries in shape. So really, when I just shared a moment ago about Sam and I and my mate, that was a boundaries thing, because to be honest, like the boundaries are coming down. I mean, this is a real mate, so it's not like it's never a project. I was just exhausted because that's not the only person I want to love and serve and be present to, and to help me manage my own boundaries and to keep healthy myself meant I have to invite other people into the process of leading, loving, and serving others. So I think just set clear ones. Sometimes I still do it. Like this thing never stops going off, and I get emails. So Beth, do you know what Beth did recently? That's my wife. She was like, Mondays no phones, because Monday's our day off together. And I'm like, I need it for 30 minutes. I just go check my emails in the evening. But she's like, we need like appropriate boundaries. Like there has to be time when we reset. So that's our Sabbath. So like try and disconnect as much as we can on that day. And yeah, like honestly, like it's one of the reasons I'm not a big fan of these things as well, because like you will get calls, you will get texts at all kinds of times. It's perfectly okay to not respond every time, every hour of every day. So just make that choice and be free from the kind of guilt. If there's something serious that comes up, know who to talk to. I'm sure you've all got another leader or another pastor or someone. Refer on, like go up a little bit to someone else and just say, look, this is what's happening over here. I need help. I don't think I have the expertise or the knowledge, or I don't know what to do here. So always invite other people when appropriate into the process, but don't be ashamed of the boundaries, because sometimes we feel like, oh, sometimes I'll watch my phone ring out and I'm like, I'll call back in half an hour, just can't be right now. So yeah, I think I would just be free to make that decision. What's this tech guru thing? I want to know.
As a tech guru, you can just decide when your do not disturb comes on during the days. So
yes,
you can check that
true.
one out.
Mine comes on at 10 p.m. It's a bit late.
Yeah, there you go. I have mine set to 8 p.m., but I don't really follow it that well. So Rachel chucked in a question, I guess, and Beck as well.
And Sammy piled on too.
And Sammy piled on. Oh, yeah, down the bottom. There
Great
we go.
discussion.
So we've got, should you actively be taking on their burdens? And how do you not take on burdens? And then what if you're unsure about what could be too much to handle? And what about the risk of driving someone or a youth away by not giving them what they need?
Whoa, huge question.
There's a lot. So maybe let's break it down. Maybe we start with just.
I'm sorry, it was confusing, by the way.
It's cool. We'll tackle it. But let's just go with the first ones. Like, so when it comes to taking on people's burdens, because I've been there, I think we've all been there, where you start, things become your burden, and and then it, like you said, like they become maybe dependent on you. So I mean, the first verse that jumps to mind for me is he must increase and I must decrease, is that it can never be about us. But in your perspective, how do we make sure that we don't take people's burdens on personally, and that we can continue supporting them in a loving and, I guess, supportive way?
Yeah, huge. When you guys find the perfect balance, tell me. I'm keen to hear about it. Well, two scriptures come to mind. The first is an encouragement. I'm a big fan of all the, there's 59 one another commands in the New Testament. And one of those is bear one another's burdens. So it is actually a good thing for us as believers and lovers of Jesus to bear the burdens of others. But ultimately, Jesus is the burden bearer. And the other scripture that comes to mind is, come to me, all you who are weary and heavy laden, I will give you rest. Again, good discipleship will always lead people to Jesus. Honestly, I'm thinking about it. This is giving me like crazy like memories from doing youth ministry, and the sleepless nights, and being sometimes in way over my head, just going like, I'm not like I did study social work, but still some of the things that I was coming across, I'm going, this is too much for me. So I would always suggest, and it's always a tricky line, you don't want to, particularly if there's sin issues or something like that with a young person, you don't want to air someone else's dirty laundry to other leaders. But what you do need is an appropriate outlet to talk through what's going on. So I'll give you my experience. I was the youth pastor. Sam, Beck, your parents were the under 35s pastors, and they were my port of call. And so when things got difficult, ultimately, not only do I go to Jesus, but I really had people in my life who I could then go and in confidence say, hey, this is happening, or this happened. What would you do? And how do I do this? And ultimately, again, it's really important that we never do these things alone, and that we never feel alone. And if you actually are, you're going like, I feel alone, it's time to reach out to someone. So whether it's your pastor or a trustworthy person who sort of has scope and insight into the space where you're leading, you need it. Like in social work or as a psychologist or anything where people are going to be listening and putting things on you and sharing expectations or sharing hurts, if you're doing that as a professional or whatever, you will always have supervision, which means you'll actually always have a positive outlet to go and talk through your feelings. We had really real things. I remember one time we had a young girl who self-harmed in our bathrooms. Like, that's a horrible thing to have to navigate. Like, a girl in a cry for help hurt herself while at youth. You need to process that. You need to talk through that. We had one night, I remember a young girl and guy getting arrested at youth. They were taken outside by the cops. They resisted arrest, and then I had to watch myself and another leader as one of these kids got slammed face first into the concrete because they were resisting, arrested and thrown in the back of a paddy wagon. And so I watched on as the other female leader saw that, and I could tell like that really affected her. Like she didn't appreciate. No one will appreciate seeing that, but I could tell that rocked her. So when that kind of thing happens, man, I had to make sure she's taken care of. She needs to talk about that. She needs to be prayed with. And so my thing is always have a port of call. It might be a formal thing in your church, or it might be an informal thing, but have someone who you can confide in. You're not expected to have all the answers. I tell you what, most of the time, when I'm making decisions in church, I have like 3 or 4 people that I'm running things through, that I'm getting clarity on. I don't have all the answers. You're not made to lead on your own. And so, I don't know. Is that helpful? Is there, maybe you have some other angles you want to come at? Does anybody else have experience that they want to share?
Yeah, I would just say the same is like, you've got to, like, just because you're in a role in terms of ministry doesn't mean that you have the capacity to handle people's complex issues. And you never, in some ways, when you try to do that, can actually be more damaging to the person when they actually probably need some professional help, or somebody who knows has a skill set to be able to help them get through some of the things they're navigating. And I think youth ministry is probably one of the biggest spaces to do that. So I work in the same kind of social work sort of role that Josh is talking about. And the same thing, if it's outside of your professional scope, you need to refer to somebody else who can. So I'd say when things like that are happening, you need to say, okay, this is outside of what I can do. I'm going to help you find help with someone else, and then walk with them through that journey with someone else.
Yeah, I mean, like, just off that, maybe one practical note then could be having, I know they do this in childcare, is you've got your list of go-to things. You know, if you need something, maybe that's something that Rev can look into as well, Jody. But I think that could be a good practical note, is whether it's within the church and having your personal support structures, or whether it's having specific reference points for counselors and social workers and psychiatrists, or whatever you feel you need, having that ready and available, and I think also forming relationships with those kind of people between your youth ministry or your adult ministry, so that you aren't just kind of doing it alone, because there's so much of that in ministry where you just feel like you're totally alone. But yeah, that's really good. I guess we kind of touched on Sammy's question there, about what could be too much to handle and what the risk of driving someone away if we don't have what they want. But I guess the answer being there that it's again, it's not about us, and that if like Jody said, like, we can sometimes do more harm by trying to keep something in our own ball court, as opposed to referring on. And I think in that scenario, I don't know if anyone wants to add to this, but in that scenario, I remember reading that something along the lines of, you know, as a youth leader, your role is not to be a mental health worker. Your role is to be a youth leader, and to love and to support and to build relationship and to pray for and read the word, and that's your role, not to do the work of someone who's, like Jody said, specialized in that area. And so I guess if at any point it does feel like you're out of your depth, it doesn't mean that you just kind of send them on their way and say, look, it's too much, good luck. Keep supporting them and loving them, but there should be people that come alongside and support them professionally who are in that space. I don't know, Sammy, is there anything else you'd want to add to your question? Or
not necessarily, but I guess I just want to say, like, off that point, like, you know, like referring on to like professional help in regards to mental health, a lot of my youth girls, they suffer from some kind of mental health issue and would actually struggle to get appointments to go see professional people. So, like, in all up, sometimes I'm the only one that they can kind of let things out to. So, like, is that still something to kind of try and refer them on to professional help, even though that they can't really? Or, like, does that make sense?
Yeah, Jody, you might be well equipped, or and Josh, but Jody, I know you've worked in this.
Yeah, no, I think access is extremely difficult, like, and particularly at the moment. I think you'd, like Sam kind of mentioned, you don't like referring, give up on them, move them on to the next thing. I think you walk through them, and that can mean having conversations in between or while waiting for professional help. If there's like times where it is waiting and it feels like it's getting out of your depth, that's where you have to kind of be like, hey, I'm happy to support you, I'm happy to walk with you, but I don't really know, like, this is out of my ability to help you. That's probably, like, being completely honest about what you can and can't do is what I would say is the best thing. And then maybe, like, just like, there's various helplines and stuff that you could ring to get advice to about what you can and can't do, or where there might be risk, all those kind of things, which, like, I'm happy to give you, or Josh would probably, or Sam would probably be able to give them to you. But yeah, like, educate yourself as much as you can, but you're also not professional, so you don't give advice, you don't, you know, outside of what you can, but still walk with them, but be honest about what you can and can't, like, do in your capacity. Yeah.
I think, and also celebrating the gifts of what you guys do bring. And so, like, one of the roles of the church is being present to one another. So your listening ear as well is making an impact in all those young girls' lives, for example. Your presence is making an impact. Your prayers are making an impact. The fact that young person then has another 3 or 4 girls around her in your context is a gift to them. And Thanks, Caleb. Caleb just wrote nice beard. So, and so, you know, like, be honest with what the church is and what the church is called to be. Yeah, and celebrate that. That's a great gift to these girls. That's super important.
Yeah, and you can speak to things like their identity, and you can provide a place for them to belong, and provide, you know, a sense of love and a sense of like a place of peace, you know, all of those kind of things that they're looking for and longing for, which like any mental health research will tell you is essential to recovery anyway. So in a sense, even though you might feel like you're not having impact, or you don't have the things to say, or you're not helping their situation, you 100% are, especially spiritually. So don't discount like the seeds that you plant in all of your connections with those people.
That's good. Well, we're nearing an hour, guys. So I reckon, look, we'll probably look to wrap it up, unless there's like a burning question that you really want to ask. That being said, like, I'm sure if anyone has any specific questions, you can reach out to me or Jody, and if you want to, we can get in contact with Josh as well. So if you do have anything that you really want to pop off quickly, feel free to unmute yourself and ask it. Otherwise, I'm going to give you like 5 seconds. Just cut me off. I'm going to keep talking, and then
Just kidding.
Nothing. All right. Okay. Cool. Well, I reckon we wrap it up there, guys. Thank you, Josh, for sharing, and for Jody for what you just shared there as well. That took a cool turn, I think, down the road of just, I think mental health is a big part of just working with young people these days. So super essential. And if you're watching back, I hope you've enjoyed it too. And yeah, I guess we'll be back with another one soon. I would say in around a month's time. Is that right, Jody? We'll probably hit another one. So for those of you guys watching now, you can join in again in a month, and anyone watching online, we'll go in another month. But otherwise, we'll call it there.
Awesome. Thanks for having me, guys. Nice to see you all.
Josh.
Catch you guys.
Love your wisdom.
Catch you later, guys.
See ya.
Bye.